From 100% CGI face replacements, using digital doubles for fight scenes, hundreds of background replacements and set extensions, and 100% CGI scenes, all of this required an insane amount of work and from multiple different VFX studios. This is Deadpool and Wolverine without CGI. Let's start with the scenes in the void. While there has been behind the scenes pictures of sets online, you'll notice in these breakdowns they replaced the entire sets with CGI for some of the shots. But why? Why would they have to replace things digitally that people spent their time building practically? Well, for one, the practical sets serve as great reference for the CGI, so building them is still worth it. But building the environment digitally gives the filmmakers flexibility to make changes in post-production to any part of the background. Now you'll notice for something like this, they kept the original 20th century logo and just replaced the background behind Deadpool. But for a shot like this, everything is replaced digitally. The background, the 20th century logo, but even Deadpool and Wolverine themselves were replaced. What surprised me is that they replaced Hugh Jackman's face here too, and didn't just do a face replacement on the digital body. A similar technique was done when he's crawling towards Deadpool. His entire body and face were CGI. Now obviously you can't expect a 56-year-old Hugh Jackman to be crawling like that, but I think it's more impressive how they rebuilt his face with CGI, and I personally couldn't tell. For something more subtle, just Deadpool's katana and mask were replaced here. Now even since the first Deadpool movie, Deadpool's eyes are CGI, and sometimes they replace most of his mask. This is so they can get more of Ryan Reynolds' expressions to show in the character. So in every scene with Deadpool, his eyes are CGI, and sometimes his entire mask. Judging though how Marvel does Spider-Man now, because if you didn't know, they replace his mask with CGI every time, it may be safe to assume there's more CGI than we think here. The way that they did this effect here may surprise you. Obviously this wasn't done practically, but I bet you didn't realize that the entirety of Matthew McFadden's face is CGI. The level of detail is insane, honestly. Like looking at his skin and pores, it's probably the most realistic CGI face I've ever seen. You would think they would only use part of his face for this, which is what they did for a scene like this with Wolverine. She basically pretends to do it and then they add a small portion of CGI on top for the effect. But for others like this, it's a 100% CGI head. For the scenes in Ant-Man's suit place with Alioth, you'll notice that they did build part of the sets, but obviously Alioth was a digital simulation. Most of that set was used though, like for a scene like this, the entire bottom half was kept, but Ant-Man's mask opening and the skull behind it were all digital elements. The scene I find most interesting in this specific set was the end fight. You'll notice they filmed part of it for real, but a bunch of the extra people fighting were 100% CGI. I honestly didn't even think of that, and the whole thing ends up getting covered with smoke and explosions anyway. Looking at the wide shots are cool too, to see the things in the background that were never meant to be seen. The bus sequence is another big part of the movie and another set that they mostly built but ended up being replaced, like in this shot here. You'll also notice that in this scene the baby Deadpool is 100% CGI. Another one of the characters in the movie is Dogpool, and while it is true that this is a real dog named Peggy who won the Britain's Ugliest Dog contest, for a lot of the scenes of her running she's replaced with a digital character. Also, the goggles she wears and her eyes under it are CGI, which may seem obvious, but it's not something that you'd necessarily think about. For the scenes in Wolverine's mind, you can see that they built most of the set for real, but VFX were used to extend these backgrounds for the whole frame. Although if you line it up, you can see it's different, so maybe they secretly replaced everything with CGI. The effect for Pyro obviously wasn't done using real fire, but in order to accurately get the lighting that the fire would emit, the actor wore a rig with what looks like a cube with an LED light inside, so they could just use the light emitted from that in the real shots. The last thing I want to talk about is all the background replacements. Right from the opening scene, you'll notice most of the woods are not really there, but the set where I think this is most impressive is when they're in the diner type place in the void. All of the windows are covered with blue screens, and honestly it looks like they're just sitting by actual windows. It's relatively simple VFX compared to the other things in the movie, but I think it's one of the best jobs they did because every single shot in this sequence had to use VFX for background replacements. And that's it for now for these effects. Let me know how many of these you knew, and let me know if you want a part 2 to this.